the psyche of men. And you're only going to be seeing me for a very, very short time as I introduce our panelists and then get out of their way. So up on our screen, we have, hold on, let me just organize myself here. Dr. Terrence Bernard, who 30 years, over 30 years, graduated from the university with an MBBS degree in 1987, and he completed his postgraduate training in psychiatry at the university in 2003. He has worked in the community mental health service for over 10 years, reaching the level of regional psychiatrist. He has also worked as a consultant psychiatrist in a general hospital for the past 9 years and also part-time with children and adolescents in the Juvenile Correction centers for over 17 years. Also in child guidance clinics in Northeast Regional Health Authority for 9 years. And he's also an associate lecturer in the Department of Community Health and Psychiatry since 2012 and teaches medical students and residents. He's married to Jackie and for 33 years and counting with 3 adult children. Welcome, Dr. Bernard.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, I am hearing you.
Okay.
Sylvia.
Up next.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Okay. Up next, we have Pastor Howard Roach. Pastor Howard Roach is a graduate of the Jamaica Theological Ceremony and an seminary. Okay, Howard, you're gonna have a lot to tease me about. He's an ordained minister of religion, a founding member of CRAM, which is Christians Renewed, Armed, Mission-Driven, and Mighty International Ministries, married with 2 daughters, and his mission is to encourage and challenge people to fulfill their purpose on earth by becoming who God created them to be. Welcome, Pastor Howard Roach. I await the teasing. I know I'm going to get it.
It's ready.
Our co-host and moderator is none other than Hubert Lawrence. Oh, Hubert describes himself as a simple man, which, you know, for all of us who know him, he's really a man of excellence. Sports commentator and journalist, and my very good friend. Welcome, Hubert.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and without further ado, I'm going to just jump out of your way. And thank you to our viewers who are already tuning in. You may communicate with the panelists by leaving questions in the chat, and we will put them up on the screen as needed. Take it away, Hubert.
Thank you, Sylvia, and welcome to everybody who is viewing this internet broadcast. Big Man Talk today continues to look at real life issues, some which are on top of people's minds, some which are just below the surface, but just as important. And with us today, 2 really big men, and maybe one more to add. Dr. Bernard, we're going to ask you to lead off, to give us the medical perspective in a nutshell of how mental issues affect physical health and vice versa. Many people walk around with issues, all of us do, different types of issues, and now we want you to put it in perspective in the context of our discussion today. And, you know, the feeling is that people need insights. Are there, Dr. Bernard, any physical conditions which impact our psychological health? And if the answer is yes, what are they? Over to you. You're the leader of man, Dr. Bernard. Let's go.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Are you able to see it? Yes. I want to focus on the topic for a few minutes to make sure that we're all on the same page. Are you hearing me, Hubert?
Loud and clear, Doc.
Okay, beautiful. And so the question I was posed was similar to what you just said, Hubert, how issues that affect our body can determine whether or not we have a healthy psychological perspective. you actually did it both ways. How the body affects the psyche, how the psyche affects the body. And we're going to be looking at that. And my purpose here is to educate and to help people to understand. So I'm going to start with a definition of the mind. And while I want you to ponder that definition, I'm not going to read it out loud because I'm sure most all of you can read. I'm going to point out that the mind, this very interesting spiritual, what is the word now? Intangible thing, actually has an origin and a basis in a tangible thing, which is the organ called the brain. The brain is the most exciting of all the organs. You could possibly live without a lot of organs, but you cannot live without the brain because, and so the brain is where we're going to focus. And so, as was said in the introduction, we're going to be talking about the mind-body connection. And I think if you realize where I'm getting to, if the brain is where the mind is, then the brain is a part of the body, and the brain is actually connected to all parts of the body. So this picture is just to give you an example. On the right, we have the motor system, and on the left, we have the sensory system. And it shows you that there is a map of your body on your brain. And you can see by the size of the different parts of the body, the level of representation there is in the brain. So you find that that hand, look on the right, look how big it is as opposed to the trunk and the rest of the body. And so there is a map of the body on the brain, and so the body is represented. Very important to understand. This is just a picture to show you how the brain is connected to the rest of the body through the nerve cells and the nerve pathways. And not only the outside part of the body, but the muscle and skeleton part, but also the organs of the body are connected by a nervous system called the autonomic nervous system, which is different from the central nervous system that we just showed a while ago. And so the takeaway from these pictures is that the brain is connected to every single part of the body. So it receives information from the body, but it also gives information and instruction to the body. So there's a two-way flow of information between the brain and the body. In addition to understanding the connection, you have to also understand how it's organized, that there are parts of the brain that are responsible for certain things. I know most of you may know that the visual part of the brain is the back part called the occipital cortex, and the front part of the brain, the forebrain, is where we have what we call executive functioning, where you have planning and organization. Everything, your motivation starts right there. Your reasoning and even your personality at the front of the brain. And you notice in the middle of the brain there, where you have movement, that's the motor system. So the motor system is towards the front of the brain, and the sensory system is towards the back of the brain. All right. So you don't have to study it and know it perfectly. It's just to understand that the brain is organized and different parts of the brain are responsible for different things. Now, looking at the brain from another direction, we're looking at it now from the brain stem, which is the spinal cord up into the midbrain, into the cerebral cortex. You find that in the lower parts of the brain, our vital functions are controlled, right? Essential to life, temperature, heart rate, blood pressure, your breathing is controlled in this area as well. And then of course, functions like sleep, your appetite, your consciousness, which is your arousal, and of course, your emotion. There's this thing called the limbic system, emotions and sexual behavior, and this this is going up. So you find that the upper parts of the brain is where our intellectual functioning takes place, right? Moving right along. So the brain, and of course you've heard of left brain, right brain, how left brain is more logical and reductionistic, whereas the right brain is more creative and artistic. Okay, so the brain has different functions. And of course, coming down to the element of the brain, this is the nerve cell which connects everything. The brain and the central nervous system and all the nervous system is full of these nerve cells, and they are the ones that carry information back and forth. This is how they communicate one nerve cell to the next in that area. And all of this is showing you that if there's any physical problem anywhere along the line, then this can affect how your brain functions, and therefore it affects your psyche, your mental health, or your psychological well-being. And I just want to introduce these components of mental health: perception, thinking, behavior, emotions, interaction with the environment. And I'm going to try and define each of these. Okay. Now, perception is how you view reality. So you receive information through your senses, and that information is converted into psychological information. And so that's what perception is. It's governed by the brain. Thinking is something that we take for granted. You know, these may be some definitions: exercising the mental capacities. If you're doing arithmetic, you're thinking. If you're composing a song, you're thinking. So thinking is mental action. And this is another definition. But I won't stay here because my time is restricted. And behavior, very important. Behavior is what you do. Action, response to stimuli, motor activity, that's behavior. And all of that is controlled by the brain. Your emotions are controlled by the brain. This is a definition of emotions. Notice here that emotions have psychic, which is psychological, somatic, which is body, and behavioral components. So emotions are complex things, and it's controlled by the brain. Okay, an act or state of excited feeling, the power of feeling, that's what emotions are. And this is another part, the interaction with the environment. So your social functioning, your relationships with yourself, your relationships with others, occupational functioning, productivity, all of those are important for good mental health. And these are the causes of mental health problems. Now you have the biological, the psychological, and the social. And I have been tasked with highlighting the biological. And just to say that these are some of the ways in which we can be affected by inherited things, other genetic abnormalities, physiological, meaning that you can have substance acting on the brain, like medication, heavy metals, or even drugs, recreational drugs. And then, of course, medical conditions can act on the brain. So I'm going to just stop there for the moment, just to, I know that I've probably gone over my time, and to allow for the next person to speak.
And Doc, before we go to Pastor Howard, I have a question. Looking at your presentation, you showed a map of the body showing how interconnected the brain is with all parts of the body. And you showed another map of the brain showing where it handles each set of functions in the brain. Let me ask you, while you in your profession understand this to be true, in 30 odd years of experience in the field, have you found that the general public understands this mind-body link?
Well, you notice, if you listen to my language at first, I said that the mind is this intangible thing. And so when it comes to the mind, and even if you think about it, when you're thinking, you're not making, even when you're thinking, you're not making the connection that, just like how like how if you feel your heart beating, If you feel your heart beating, you know it's your heart. But when you're thinking, you're not really aware that this is an organ in my body. And so it's really a very interesting thing. So you find that a lot of persons are not aware of that, and that is where stigma arises, because stigma arises out of ignorance. And so people have these concepts of mental health that are unrelated to reality, but it's based on tradition and points of view. So there are a lot of people who don't really know it, and even the persons who know it sometimes don't behave like they know it.
Thanks, Doc. And if you're just tuning in, welcome to Big Man Talk. Dr. Terrence Bernard has gotten the ball rolling. He has established for us, is that right brain, Doc? The connection between mind, the distinction between mind and brain, and the link to the body. And now we're going to go to Pastor Howard Anthony Roach. He too has decades of experience in his area. He's a pastor. He's involved in grassroots programs, dealing with people right there on the front line of life. And Doc, your 4.1 minutes to set the table for this topic about the issues that affect mind, body.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Blessings to everyone. Issues that affect our spirit can retard our psyche. When we in Jamaica talk about spirit, sometimes when people get so far and think about dopey, but the reality is based even from scripture. And I'll just read this, and I'm not preaching, don't worry, I'm not preaching. Now may the God of peace make you holy in every way, and make your whole spirit, soul, and body. So when we look at human beings, we're seeing what we call a three in one: spirit, soul, and body. Very often when spirit is mentioned, it is sort of, strange in terms of how people perceive that, because spirit is something you can't see. Even from a biblical perspective, spirit means wind. And because of that, human beings, I think, tend to focus more on the body, that which they can see, not realizing that there are two other parts that are just as important to the whole body concept to make us who we are. The invisible part of man, that is where we feel, where we have perceptions, where we reflect, we have desires, the spirit man. But as much as the spirit man is invisible, life happens and life impacts on the spirit man. As again, if where we feel, where we perceive, reflect, and have desires, if everything around us is coming at us, whether in a negative way or a positive way, it is going to impact us, and especially as men. Life happens, death happens, loss of job, relationship issues, other types of issues, not to mention that very often as men, we are said to be carriers. We carry a whole of baggage because we don't know how to deal with those other things. And I add this dimension as well, that there are also spiritual issues that we have to deal with. The Bible says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and so on. So we have the natural that is impacting on our psyche. We have the spiritual that is impacting on our psyche. And how the world views men in general is, from using church language, we say the man is prophet, priest, and king. He is warrior, he is provider, he is all those things and so much more. But for many men, they have to deal with who they are. And that is not always something easy to deal with. So we say he's all of this. I'm giving him all these labels. But we hear this term, as a man thinketh, so is he. So he may have the perception, or we may have the perception, that he should be strong all the time and have all the answers. But natural things are happening, impacting his psyche. Spiritual things are happening. And in the middle somewhere, he is trying to find out who he really is. And sadly, in the context of just life, and maybe more so because we live in Jamaica, we can see it here. Sadly, the image that is often cast for a man is someone who seems very angry, very confused, not sure what he's doing, and oftentimes lost. So the psyche The spirit part of the man, though not seen, is vital to understand, vital to come to grips with. And I make this also as an extra point. It is often said that it is the spirit man that has a connection to God. And sometimes, if we don't understand that, then how we deal with life and everything else, how we deal with it can affect how we perceive not just ourselves, but how we act out in daily lives among our family and friends and our peers.
Thank you, Pastor Howard. And right off the bat, I have a question for you.
All right.
Pretty often, you get science and religion at odds. But it sounds like to me that Christianity, the religion in this discussion, and science, as put forward a while ago by Doc, agree that there's an interconnectivity between your physical health and your other type of health. If I walked away with that from you, would that be correct? And why is that
You,
important?
you will be very correct because, from my perspective, I believe that all knowledge comes from God. And what God is after is that we have a balance in our lives. There is a reason why we have, even as it comes to my mind, when the Bible, in describing Jesus, says he is the wonderful counselor, many persons shy away from, and men in particular, shy away from seeking counsel, using the available resources like psychologists and psychiatrists to help them to move to a different place, a better place. It is, I think that alluded to it, this misconception that if you go to somebody like that, you're crazy. That is far from the truth. There's a balance that God wants us to have. So there is the connection that God gives to us, and we can come to God, and God can, give us the answers that we need. But He also gives us the tools in the sciences to help us to better ourselves. That's it. That's why we have doctors, we have nurses, people in the medical profession rather, and we also have, for the balance, because man is spirit, soul, and body. So I can go to the nutritionist and get what I need. But if I am not feeling well, I need to go to the scientist, so to speak, and also get that kind of help to make sure that I have the right balance. And sometimes what that means is going to someone who has the training and the expertise to help me with what is happening in my psyche. Because let's talk truth. I might have pastoral experience and I might give you pastoral counseling, but I've come upon situations where it was beyond me, and I've recommended persons to see a counselor, someone who is trained, or a psychiatrist, because I understand that that is the kind of help that they would need to help them to navigate and get to a better place where they're healed. So yeah,
You,
balance is
you,
important.
you took my next query out of my mind, or is that out of my brain? And I was gonna, and I'm gonna ask, I'm gonna ask Dr. Bernard to handle this one. Um, Based on how Dr. Bernard opened and how you opened, what should an individual do in their body, Dr. Bernard, to manage their psychological health?
Well, that's a very good question, Hubert. What we should do about in our bodies to maintain good psychological health is really to try and maintain good physical health. Because if you are physically healthy, then it's likely that you're going to have a healthy brain. And so we do, you see, we do have the ability to take control over the things that we can control. And of course, maintaining good physical health has to do with putting into practice the things that we know, like being careful about what we eat, you know, keep maintaining a reasonable body weight, exercise, keep the body moving, right? Depending on your age, you would walk or run or swim. you know. So physical exercise, eating properly, all of those things. And of course, seeking help when you need it. If you're sick, you go to the doctor. Pastor Roach said that men are not very good at seeking help, and he's right. And it's not just for psychological issues alone, also for physical issues. So you find that the men will present late when things really get out of control. The blood pressure will go on way up and cause whatever damage already, and you know, the sugar not being controlled. You find that women tend to seek help more. But what I'm saying is that that actually gives women the advantage, because the truth is that it is of no benefit to anybody to stay away from getting help, you know. And that even brings me to the balance story, because you find that many Christians, you see, we might think that scientists might only be right when they come into agreement with God, which is true. But the truth is that there are times when Christians are also wrong, because they are not in agreement with God either. So because I mean, why would God not want you to see a doctor if it's going to help you? Why would God not want you to see a counselor if it's going to help you? You see, but sometimes we put stumbling blocks in our way. And what we need to do is look at the fruit of what we do. If what we do is not helpful, if avoiding help makes things worse for us, then why would God want that? You know, some Christians
And
will
Doc,
tell people,
let me just stop you right there for a second. We have our first comment on the chat. It's from Quip Corner with Ada. And she says, yes, God wants us to have a balance. He said so in 3 John 2. So there is, as Pastor told us, a biblical basis for the chase for the pursuit of balance. And you know, it's funny, it's 27 minutes into the broadcast, and we've just begun to sort of touch the tip of this subject. And so, Doc, I wanted to ask you something, especially now where we have heightened, in the world now, heightened racial tensions coming out of events elsewhere, in particular, during the last couple of years. The question is that in Jamaica, most people are Black people, like we are we more susceptible to issues relating on this physical, psychological bandwidth than other races, or is it the same for everybody, whether they're white, red, blue, or green?
oh, let me see if I understand your question. You're asking if there are any vulnerabilities that we might have because of our race, our
Correct.
ethnicity, as opposed to
Correct.
other races?
Correct. And I'm going to
Um,
Pastor
mm,
Howard the same question afterward, based on what he sees in his era of movement. Go ahead, Doc.
well, I would say there are things that, you know, fluctuate according to race. Um, but sometimes it also has to do with lifestyle issues, and culture, right? I have actually lived in other Caribbean countries, for example, and when you compare the Jamaican diet with even Bahamas or the Turks and Caicos, we eat much more healthy than they do. When you compare our diet in Jamaica with the United States, we definitely eat more. But I mean, that is not to say that the elements are not here, because we do have those fast food places. But I'm talking about ordinary cooking at home, and in most restaurants in Jamaica tend to be healthier. That's been my experience. So what I'm saying is that I don't really know if I want to talk about racial differences. I know that there are certain, but in terms of psychological problems, there are no real differences according to race. But if you're looking at physical health, you know, Black people tend to have hypertension more, I think, you know, that sort of thing. Obesity is a problem across the board, across the races, and has more to do with lifestyle, you know. Um, so I really don't think that the race thing is that that much of a strong issue, although there might be some variations. But it's mostly lifestyle and culture that I think makes the difference.
Doc, thank you so much. Pastor Howard, your congregations are, I imagine, varied. Do you see, both from a spiritual point of view, that type of variation that Doc talked about from his perspective?
To be clear, variation
in how different races experience the link between the brain and the body.
Well, certainly, I mean, I've not had the opportunity to be in other jurisdictions, but in Jamaica, I think we basically are on the same plane. I think how we view things, again, looking at it from the psyche, that we are all, or not all, but we are similarly affected by the things around us. It seems like we have a connection with, whether it is how we were raised, whether it is our history, whether it is our natural environment. I think there is a similarity right across the board, especially in Jamaica, because that's what I know. But what I do know in the midst of it, though, is that people are still trying to understand and trying to come to grips with the reality that we have. The quick corner, the scriptures, 3 John 2, when it says, "Beloved, I wish above all things that you may prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers." That's the kind of balance. People want to have the physical health, they want to have the emotional health and the spiritual health. I think for many, the challenge is, how do I get there? And unfortunately, I believe that some have been conditioned to think that they can't get there. So they accept a particular lot. Boy, some mistake, my granddad stays, and they accept that kind of a lot. Again, ignoring avenues where they can be assisted. And there has to be some kind of change in terms of how we think. And I say, especially for persons in church and for Christians, there, across the board, there is this thing about getting counseling, sometimes even pastoral counseling. And I get it. People sit down and they talk with each other and they say, that's counseling to some degree. You talk to your virgin, you talk to your group, you talk in a WhatsApp group. But sometimes they're going through, the people you're talking to, going through similar or worse, and all them can say is, that's true. And at the end of the day, nobody moves further. We are no better than we were 5 minutes ago, 5 days ago, 5 years ago. And there are avenues that are open to our people, and especially to men, to get the help that they need to become what I call the better, best version of themselves.
We're going to touch that in a minute. If you're just tuning in, thank you. This is Big Man Talk. You're hearing the voice of, I'm Hubert Lawrence. Just heard Minister of Religion Howard Roach, and we've got Dr. Terrence Bernard with us, showing us different sides of what might be the same coin. And now we're going to take a little look at a little piece of video information that's going to spice up the conversation a bit more.
Actually, it's an ad. Sorry. And I have a question. When I run the ad, I want to share something with both Howard and Dr. Terrence, and I'd love their feedback on it. So let me just run this clip and then I'll get back.
I'm Dr. Arlene Rose Lewis, and my latest book, Healing Now, a quick self-help guide for your body, soul, and spirit, is now in the pipeline at the Publisher's Notebook.
Hi everyone, my name is Marlette Pottinger. Please look out for my book, The Making of a Consecrated Priest, now in the pipeline of the Publisher's Notebook. Thank you so much.
This is Chef Keisha Watson. Look out for my new cookbook entitled Meet Me in the Kitchen, The Art of Cooking, published by the Publisher's Notebook. Thank you. See you. Meet me in the kitchen.
And if you don't know, the publisher's book
So what I want to
is...
share is an experience I had in hold on. All this time, one wasn't hearing me, don't it? All
Oh,
right.
Hubert was saying something actually.
All right. What I want to share is an experience I had in this ministry of which I'm a part. And we went to a particular community to pray for healing. And we noticed that most of the men that came were blind. And what I'm really addressing here is the things that we speak over ourselves, the connection between what we speak over ourselves and what becomes. And I thought it was such a commonality that it could not be a coincidence. So when I checked, I realized that all of them kind of started losing their sight at around the same time. And so I asked, what happened in your community at that time? And everybody got silent, and I had to assure them that what they said was confidential. So I'm not even going to name the community or anything. They said that some gunmen moved into their community and they started to see some things happening. And almost collectively, they said it at one time or another, boy, me I turn a blind eye to this. And all of them manifested symptoms of blindness, decreasing vision, blurred vision, some of them not seeing. Your comments on that? And then I'm coming off the screen.
Let me start with
Uh-huh.
Doc. Pastor Rose talked about men. I want to ask a question after this one, but this one is important now. From a medical point of view, a psychological point of view, what could be the cause of that onset of blindness across several men from one community at that particular time?
Well, I really want to be very careful about making pronouncements about that because in my field, you need to have a history. You need to examine the person, and in order to come to your conclusion. So,
But the
I have
history
to
is that
say,
women moved in.
no, but that's not enough information. That's not enough information. That's not enough information because. But can I just say this though, that for me, I'm not sure if it is even a fair question because I can just say that it opens up the consideration, right? That there is a tremendous psychological impact. Because if you really look at what I have been saying, is the connection between the brain and the body, and there's communication going in both directions. So, for example, let me see if I can explain. So, if something happens to you psychologically, right, it occurs through your perception. Because let's say Hubert and I have an argument, and Hubert starts shouting at me at the top of his voice and telling me all kinds of negative things about myself, then I am here. These things are bombarding my senses. And so I am hearing things, I am seeing his expression, and I'm having an emotional experience. And all of that is being mediated through the brain. And it registered as a negative event, maybe even frightening or traumatic, because if him decide to take out him gun and start threatening me. So the point I'm making is that it's the brain that is processing all of that. Whatever the person is seeing, hearing, and feeling, the brain is processing it. So what I'm saying is that whatever is affecting us psychologically can also affect us physically because of the communication. And if you remember the slide about emotions, that emotions have both psychological and body, psychic, somatic, and behavioral. So the emotions are feelings that are affecting us psychologically. It's affecting us in our body, and it is having an effect on our behavior. So the point I'm making is that it is conceivable, because persons have presented with medical problems that have a psychological basis. So, for example, persons are presented to the doctor with blindness, and an examination of that person cannot find a reason for that blindness. And so, therefore, the conclusion comes that the blindness is because it's psychological. So, I'm saying that those are the possibilities. I cannot speak to the exact circumstances, but these things are possible. Persons have had fainting spells, they have had seizures that are not real seizures because it's psychological. You know, psychological problems can cause your blood pressure to go up. Psychological problems can cause your heart to beat fast. Psychological problems can precipitate an asthmatic attack. Psychological problems can precipitate a heart attack. So it is, these things are possible based on psychological grounds. Yes. And
Pastor Howard.
I don't even know the spiritual component that might be behind this as well.
I'm asking, let me ask Pastor Howard to take the baton from you right there.
Yes.
I'm going to say two things very quickly. Some would hear something like that and would say, you know what? Life and death is in the power of the tongue. So some would just say, well, they spoke it into being. We don't know that as evidence. But this a spiritual component is just referring again in the Word of God. We've seen where blindness, persons had blindness. The history wasn't given, but the blindness happened. And depending on what we read, the encounter with Jesus or the disciples, the blindness went. There can be spiritual components that help to bring on these kinds of things. Again, in the Bible, we saw different sicknesses, different illnesses. In our context, again, and let's just keep it real like a two-piece meal deal. In our context, we know people go get a bad obium and this and that has a lot of spiritual connotations. And again, our food culture state. We believe a lot in what we don't see. So people open the door at night time and throw out water and say, excuse me, it's darkness out there, but they perceive that someone is there. So again, we have the natural, the psychological, but we also have the spiritual dimension. And I agree with that. It would really take maybe a sitting down with each person there to find out what exactly caused this. But
I was going to ask you that
from both perspectives, that the possibility is that things would come in play from both sides.
I've got a subject in my head for the last 15 minutes, but I want to ask you again now, Pastor Howard. Doc has pinpointed history as a key instrument in him being able to diagnose from the psychological to the physical. Do you need, and you started to hint it a while ago, would you need the person's spiritual history before you begin to sort of diagnose this physical output of the blindness?
I would just want to know how I approach things. I want to know their story, just their background, what happened, what from childhood. When someone sits in front of me, depending on what they're there for.
Pastor, that's history.
I want to. History, but not necessarily spiritual history. Just let me hear your story, because a lot of times, and I've sat with persons and men. Let me say it again. I've sat with men who have sometimes diagnosed themselves, and they tell me what is going on and what is going on inside of them and da. And sometimes based on what I pick up from what they're saying, I say, yeah, there are some components here, and some things were easier to work through than other things. But again, I'm the kind of person that I'm not proud if something is outside of my scope, and because my goal for you is that you are the best version of yourself, then I would recommend you to someone else. But history is important, background is important. Again, the truth is, in the span of time that I've counseled with persons, most of the people I've sat with are women, again, because man I like talk about certain things. We probably, they are one bar or so, but the deeper things we don't like to get into. I think part of it is how we've been conditioned, how we grow up, and how we're made to feel. And let me just add this. A couple years ago, I remember listening to the news, and 4 older gentlemen were at a liquor bar playing dominoes. Gunmen came up and killed them. I remember it was a news item, and I know that persons may misunderstand what I'm saying right now because sometimes people listen with emotions. I remember it was a news item. 4 older men who probably gave to their community and so on were just shot and killed. Nothing happened. I remember not long after that, a lady was killed and there was an uproar across Jamaica. And in that moment, I realized 2 things. We really don't value life, generally speaking, I think, in Jamaica, but we don't value the life of men. Sound hard? That things will happen. And I think sometimes the men that we have to deal with and counsel, they feel like we don't matter. Men don't matter because things will happen and it's just, sure, I'm on that. Yeah, but something else happens and there is an uproar or everybody takes to the street. That I think is also
Pastor
part
Howard,
of it.
let me ask you. This is Big Man Talk. We're into the
Okay.
last
Why
15
men
minutes, and we're going to
refuse
go
to
to
say.
Dr. Howard.
Mhm.
It's very important now. Both
Dr.
of
Howard,
you
all right, thank
have
you.
pinpointed Pastor Howard, Dr. Bernard. Both of you have pinpointed a reluctance by men sometimes to deal with these psychological, spiritual, physical issues across the board. We're down the stretch. First with you, Doc. What do you recommend men to do to improve how they handle this very important connection between mind and body and health?
Well,
Doc.
you know, this is something that I wanted to say earlier and I missed the opportunity. I know you give me the opportunity to say it again. You see, a lot depends on a person's approach to life. One of the things that we learn in psychology is that if you have a locus of control that's internal, meaning that you take responsibility for what happens to you, you take responsibility for your life, then that person is going to be less of a victim. But if the problem is with what they are doing or them, if the government this or they don't fix the road or they don't, bring light into the community, then we depend on other people, and so our well-being now becomes dependent on others. So it's out of our hands. So you find that refusing to seek help is actually not taking responsibility, not being the one to make your life what it's supposed to be. And so this is what I would like to encourage, that people need to understand that they have a say. Just like how you choose to eat what you eat, you choose to exercise or not, you choose to do something, you choose to drink a whole heap of rum, or you just take a drink every now and again. These are choices that people can make. And so choosing to go to the doctor, choosing to seek counseling, it's just something that needs to happen in the mind, where you make a decision. And instead of going with you see, what happens is that people tend to go along with how they feel. So the men don't feel like going because of fear or insecurity or whatever it is.
Stigma.
But the thing is, a big man is a man who acts not based on feeling, but based on what he knows is right. So it is right for you to eat properly. It is right for you to go to the doctor. It is right. And who want to stand in their own way? Because if you don't seek help, then things are going to get worse. So we have to choose to make things better by doing the things that make things better. Your blood pressure is too high. You need to go and see the doctor. You don't just sit down and drink some coconut water and hope that it will go away. You check it again and it's still high. What do? You go to the doctor. But so men need to take responsibility, and men need to recognize that they can be in control by just choosing to control the things that they can control. And there's a lot of things we have control over.
I got one. I'm quoting a certain Dr. Terrence Bernard. A big man is a man who does not act on feelings, but acts on what is right. Pastor Howard, your reaction to that? What can men learn from women that supports better psychological and therefore physical health?
Okay. Right. We need to own our feelings and our emotions. You know, it's okay to be afraid. It's okay to be unsure. It's okay to be a little bit confused or very confused. It is okay because everybody has been there. We own it. It's full. It's not somebody else cause it, which we're good at blaming, like Adam was very, very good at blaming, but it's ours. And I have what I call the T's. Just as Doc says, if we take responsibility, then one of the T's that we should do is go seek therapy, whether it is pastoral or professional or both. Another thing that we can do is talk to ourselves, but in a positive talk. And I keep on saying, in Jamaica, say if you talk to yourself, Jamaicans say if you talk to yourself, you're mad. And I say no. If you talk to yourself and answer in a different voice, then there's a problem right there. But if you talk to yourself, I'm just saying, you may need psychological and deliverance. Okay, so talk to yourself. Look here. My mother used to talk to herself, and she was one of the sanest and wisest women on the earth. Talk to yourself, because sometimes positively, I should say, positively, talk to yourself. Talk to friends. Talk to God. And ties.
I've got
ties. No man is an island. Stay well with stay in a group. No man is an island. We pull back, we run away, we go in our cave. Stay in groups that are healthy, stay in groups that can build, ties. I call that the ties. Tie up yourself with people who will push you, will help to motivate you and encourage you. And if they want to rebuke you with love, fine, because sometimes we need that too.
I have another comment from the chat. There are at least 6 Hubert Lawrences. There may well be 6 Courtney Morrisons. He writes in, good morning. What is the driving force? Question directed at the panel. Courtney Morrison, I think Fellowship Tabernacle in my general neighborhood in the big parish of St. Catherine. What is the driving force that caused all men to adopt the mindset of not going to the doctor or for any of the other maladies? Doc, your quick response.
To be honest, Hubert, I don't know if it is a social construct or not. I think it may be more about how men are made up, It's not good for us. I mean, and we could say that it is God who made us this way, but I don't agree with that, because he's not going to create us in a way that is to our detriment. But I think it has something to do just with the psyche of the man, that there's a tendency not to talk a lot. There's a tendency not to be laid back when it comes to certain things. You find that women are more inquisitive and motivated towards sorting things out to do with themselves and their environment than men are. Men are probably more busy thinking high in the clouds and strategizing other things, focusing on external things rather than internal. So I really think that it's the makeup of men. But just because that is how we are psychological, it doesn't mean that we have to blame God for that. Because remember, there is also the fall of man, that it wasn't really God's plan for us to be that way. And so what I'm saying is that men can change. Men can, and when Jesus came and said, repent, change your mindset. I'm saying that we can change our mindset to think in a more positive way, right? I know that, for example, the social construct has resulted in men being irresponsible with regards to like raising children, but I really don't know if I can blame that on that. I think it has something to do with just the makeup. But I can stand corrected if somebody has another opinion.
We have another question from Reverend Sharona Brown. How do you help men, and I'm directing this to Pastor Howard now, how do you help men to get over the hurdle of being able to ask for help? What's your suggestion, Doc? That's Reverend Sharona Brown writing in.
Pastor. That's Pastor.
Well, I heard you in your section something like Pastor Morrison. So he's no, doctor.
I'm
Doctor.
giving an honorary. I'll take the honorary degree. Thank you very much. I will take it. This is a good Friday. You know, one of the things that comes to my mind is something that, for me, it's simple, but I think can be very, very effective. You know, men tend to look to other men very often, influencers. If we hear other men say, "Yo, you know, some go to the doctor thing, boy, I never really want going about because I don't want about to go around there." So, and then they speak about their experience, it makes a difference. That's number one. Two, this will, I thought about it, and I know it going to sound weird, especially when we talk about Jamaican men. When those men have influence, say, I've done it. Look here, you want me to follow you? Because sometimes that men need men to help them on the journey. Literally. Like, you need to go to the doctor, that's good. But here's the next thing. I will go with you. If we hear persons of men who have gone through, you know, and especially men who perhaps when they did an examination and they said what they discovered and it was early, and when men hear other men speaking about their experience, it does a world of good. And you know, that for me is the practical part of it. The practical part, helping other men to say, yo, we can do this together.
Dr. Bernard, we're down the stretch. If there was one takeaway that you
I'm
want to
sorry,
leave
I
with the people
accidentally kicked
who...
him off the studio. Let me see if I can get him back.
Okay,
I
let's go
accidentally
to let's
kicked
go
him
to,
off. I'm going to try and see if I can get him.
while you sort him out, I'll go with Pastor. Pastor, we're down the stretch. If there was one takeaway you wanted to leave with the people listening and viewing the show, the people writing in with their questions about how we can better manage both sides of the being, what would it be on this line from what is psychological, what is spiritual, to what is physical? What would you encourage them to do as a major takeaway?
I'm going to go back to what Quick Corner with Ada said from 3 John 2. Beloved, I wish above all things that you may prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers. That we take advantage of the benefit and the blessings of the psychological help that I can say that God has given to us, to persons who have dedicated their lives like that, to helping others to become the better, best version of themselves. And two, because again, we're talking about the spirit, to have that connection with God for yourself. It's not a dopey story. It is a reality. Having the balance, the physical, the emotional, the psychological, and the spiritual, to take advantage of those things. And especially for men, look here, if other men do it and they're not diminished, nothing wrong with you. Take advantage of what is available.
Dr. Bernard, we're down the stretch.
Yes.
Based on your comments here, 30 years of experience.
I just want to
What would
reemphasize,
you...
first of all, sorry. I just want to emphasize taking responsibility. Your life, wherever your life goes, you can be the driver, you can steer it wherever you want it to go. So you have to find out the things that you can impact, find out the things that you can change, and always be willing to do good by yourself. And so the things that are good for you, you should do them and not be afraid, because you are in control of enough things that you can have a positive impact on your life. That's what I want to take away from this.
Brilliant place to exit. Thank you very much, Dr. Pastor Howard Roach and Pastor Dr. Terrence Bernard, Hubert Lawrence on Big Man Talk. And we've in our limited time tried to touch on some of the key areas of this issue. Auntie Sylvia, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Hubert. Thank you, my panelists, Dr. Pastor Howard Roach and Dr. Terrence Bernard. Thank you for coming. Thank you to our audience for participating. We really appreciate it. Big Man Talk is aired twice per year the Father's Day and also on International Men's Day. The next event coming up on this channel will be Book Fiesta, which will be held in December, which is known as Read From Your Book Month. So we'll be putting more information about that. Thank you once more and have a wonderful and blessed day.